Margaret thought she had just bought a piece of old scrap metal for $50 at a garage sale. But when the door of that 100-year-old safe finally gave way, once upon a time, in the quiet and forgotten town of Oakhaven, days passed as slowly as the clouds in the sky, and secrets were buried deeper than the roots of the century-old oaks. Margaret Hayes, a 78-year-old woman, was one of the oldest and most discreet residents of the region. Widowed for nearly a decade, she lived in a modest house whose walls seemed to whisper memories of happier times, but now only knew the silence of lonely afternoons. Her pension was small, and for Margaret, every penny had to be stretched to the limit. She had a sacred habit that kept her mind busy. Every Saturday, she visited garage sales and charity bazaars, not to buy luxuries, but to find objects that had a soul, a story to tell. It was on one of those Saturdays that Margaret's life changed forever. In a remote neighborhood, in the backyard of a crumbling house that belonged to a former city notary, she spotted something heavy covered by a dusty gray tarp. As she pulled back the fabric, it revealed a solid steel safe, adorned with cast iron details dating back to the late 19th century. It was covered in rust, and there was no key in sight. The homeowner, a man who seemed anxious and even a little scared to get rid of everything, asked for only $50. It was half of Margaret's monthly budget, but something about the coldness of that metal and the strange carvings on the door drew her in inexplicably. With the help of a neighbor and his truck, she took the iron giant to her garage, unaware that she was transporting a historical time bomb. For the following weeks, the safe became Margaret's sole obsession. She spent hours scrubbing the rust with oil and steel brushes, revealing engravings of oak trees and symbols that she, despite living there her whole life, didn't recognize from any official city crest. She tried every possible method to open it. She used makeshift lockpicks, tried to hear the clicks of the tumblers with an old stethoscope belonging to her late husband, and even hired a local locksmith. The professional, however, gave up after an hour of work, claiming the mechanism was too complex, a lost piece of engineering that seemed designed never to be breached. He even said the safe seemed cursed by time. But Margaret was not a woman to give up. She felt, deep in her soul, that the safe was waiting specifically for her to reveal its secrets. Luck changed on a violent, stormy afternoon, the kind that makes lights flicker and the wind howl through the window cracks. While Margaret was cleaning her own attic to pass the time, she knocked over a box of heavy books that had belonged to her great-grandfather, who had been one of the region's first doctors and a confidant to the founding families. From inside an old Bible, with yellowed pages and a musty smell, fell an unusually shaped bronze key, with a handle in the shape of an oak leaf, identical to the carvings on the safe. Margaret felt a shiver run down her spine. Was it a coincidence? Or did her great-grandfather know what was hidden in that iron box? She hurried down the stairs, as fast as her tired legs would allow, and went to the cold garage. The key slid into the lock as if lubricated by fate itself, with a metallic groan that sounded like a sigh of relief. The heavy door finally swung open. Inside the safe, what Margaret found took her breath away. There were no glittering gold bars or bags of silver coins. Instead, there was a bundle of documents, wrapped in black silk, and a leather diary, perfectly preserved as if it had been placed there yesterday. The diary belonged to Elias Vance, the man everyone in Oakhaven revered as the hero and founder of the city. As she read the first pages, under the faint light of a flashlight, Margaret's hands began to shake uncontrollably. Elias was not the saint the school history books described. The diary narrated, with chilling coldness, how he and a group of influential businessmen had forged signatures, bribed judges, and used violence to seize the lands of a native community that had lived in the region peacefully for centuries. The content of those papers was a true death sentence for the local aristocracy. Elias described the exact location of a sacred burial site that had been desecrated and destroyed to build the current city hall and the central square. Margaret stayed awake all night, devouring every word. She discovered that the wealthiest and most influential families still ruling Oakhaven, those who held political and economic power, were direct descendants of the men who helped Elias Vance in his plan of ethnic cleansing and land theft. The entire wealth of the town was built on a foundation of lies and suffering. News that old Margaret had finally opened the notary's safe spread through Oakhaven like wildfire. What no one expected was what happened next. In less than 48 hours, Margaret had no peace. Luxurious black cars began parking in front of her simple house. The city mayor, a man whose lineage went back to the days of Vance, visited her personally. He didn't yell. Instead, he smiled and offered $10,000 for the safe, claiming they were documents of archaeological interest. When Margaret refused, the price rose to $50,000 and then to $100,000. The glint of panic in the mayor's eyes said it all. They didn't want history. They wanted silence. They wanted the truth to remain buried forever under the asphalt of the central square. Feeling watched, With strange cars passing by her street during the early hours of the morning, Margaret realized her life was in danger. But she also remembered the look in her great-grandfather's eyes in old photos, the look of someone carrying a weight in his heart. She realized the key was with her for a reason. Margaret would not throw the diary to the wolves. In secret, she contacted a young historian from a state university and the remaining leaders of the native community who lived in precarious conditions on a nearby reservation. Together, they digitized every page of the diary and every map of the fraud. The following Sunday, Margaret organized what she called a community tea in the town square. When the crowd gathered, including the authorities who expected her to announce the sale of the safe, Margaret stepped onto a small makeshift platform. With the original diary in hand and copies being distributed by young volunteers, she began to read. Her voice, though marked by age, resonated with the authority of someone who had nothing left to fear. She revealed the crimes, showed the forged signatures, and pointed to the ground of the square, revealing that it was a desecrated cemetery. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the crying of some residents and the shouts of protest from the wealthy families, whose masks fell before everyone. The consequences were immediate and devastating for the status quo. Federal investigations were opened to look into historical frauds that still impacted current land titles. The prestige of the founding families turned to ash. Part of the public lands were returned to the descendants of the true owners, and the city hall was demolished to make way for a memorial and native cultural center. Margaret did not accept a single penny of reward. She continued living in her modest house. But now, she never drank her tea alone. Every day, people from the community visited her, bringing flowers, bread, and gratitude. She became the living conscience of Oakhaven. The $50 safe didn't make her rich in money, but it gave her the greatest treasure of all, the certainty that the truth, no matter how heavy, is the only thing capable of setting a people free. This story proves that the truth always comes out, no matter how much time passes.